Hi, so today I want to organize my writing notes. The idea is to create a sort of story bible where I can keep all my character information, world building information, anything I need to look up, and I want to do it in a digital form, so basically to get away from this approach, right, where I don't want that whole transcription work and all that stuff and having to find my notebooks and where I wrote something down. So to keep everything in a digital form, which is easier to take around, to search stuff and to organize. I am using OneNote for this. Obviously you can use whatever software fits you, or if you want a physical notebook. It's more about the categories for me than it is about what software I'm using. The first thing I always do when I create some sort of project notebook or whatever is to name it and to put the year when I first came up with the initial idea, just because I kind of like to organize it like that. Then in terms of the sections that I need for the story bible, I have first of all the archive. In the archive I have all the stuff that I already know doesn't go into the story, old ideas or whatever that I don't want anymore. But because I don't fully know what the story is yet, I keep it here rather than delete it completely in case I want to get something from that initial idea to maybe use in some way. And the second thing that I have here is the draft that I'm working on, back up here in a cloud function, just in case my computer crashes or whatever. Then telling the story is about all the information that I need in order to know how to tell the story, but that the reader will never know about or that the characters don't know about. So for example, here you have something like world building and naming, right? So in what the story knowledge is, I have character names, and in the how to tell the story part, I have the naming section, which explains how names are used, what significant meaning there is behind, what maybe some characters' specialities are when it comes to names, all this kind of stuff that goes into when I tell the story, but which is never explicitly explained to anyone, right? It's just to enrich the story here when it comes to the names, but it can also be stuff like structure is as soon as I know how I want to tell the story, I can have like an overview of the story and sort of like an outline, but just to have an idea of how I want to tell the story in case it's not linear, for example. Then themes, topics is what is important in the story, what the story is about. Designing principle, I'll also fill in as soon as I get to it. But all these sections, those are the main sections that I need in here. So structure, theme, topic, designing principle, plot, conflict. Conflict encompasses the antagonist, the crucible, the reason why the character can't escape the conflict. Those kind of things have to go in here. Then description, tone has to do with what the story should feel like, what kind of mood you want to invoke. Narration, here it's what viewpoint. Narration tone in terms of if there is a narrator, how is the story told? For example, some narrators are very sarcastic, right? And have like their own personality. Is it something like that, or is it more detached, or is it even a character who narrates the whole thing? Also reveal of information. When do the readers learn about what, in what order? Character, when it comes to character here, it's not about the character information as such, it's how do I introduce this character? How, for example, do I introduce this character to seem like the love interest when it's actually the antagonist or something like that, right? Then character voice, the same thing. How does the character speak? What are mannerisms when it comes to the language? And also marketing kind of things, book cover, how does it play into the story? How does it fit with the tone, those kind of things. So everything that you as the writer need to know in order to tell your story goes in here. And then story knowledge is all the stuff that makes the characters, the world, the background information that you need in order to be able to even tell a story. It's information that the characters can know. Some of the the characters do know because it's their world. Some of that information the characters will learn throughout the story, and it's the information that the readers will also learn, some of it explicitly because you tell them, and some of it because they see it happen. So in here I have characters and listing the main characters, the side characters, the background characters, character relationships, then antagonist and threat, and if there are creatures, world, within the world, the world map and the locations where the story takes place. Then nature is its own thing for now, because depending on what exactly the story will be, it's a bigger section than just part of what the world is, right? Because it is a fictional world, so I haven't fully fleshed out enough yet to fully know how big of difference that world's nature is to our nature, right? But that would be its own category. Then also its own category for now is society, so the history of that world, the language, culture, technology, and then magic. Technology and magic often kind of play into the same sort of thing. They both fill a similar role in a world where it enhances the abilities that the characters have, right? Either they do it through technology, like in sci-fi, or they do it through magic, like in fantasy. So both of those sections are in here. That is the basic overview of the story knowledge that I need to have. What I'm doing here is to, once I figured out something and I know it's set and it's part of that world, I write it down in this section here so that I can look it up as information. It's not stuff that I'm still working on, that doesn't go in here. In here is really just the set information so that I have a distinction between what I already figured out and what I'm still working on. And then the final section that I have is what I like to call random starters. It is basically one page where every bit of information, every note, every research material, whatever I come across that I find could be fitting for this story, I put in here, and it stays in here until I process it and flesh it out into part of the actual story. And that is why I like to throw it all into one page, because it's supposed to be that page where you go to when you're not really sure where to go with the drafting or what you should be working at. And then you have everything in one place and you can take whatever snippet is interesting to you and work on that. That is the approach that I'm following here. Then what I like to do when it comes to the story knowledge here, that's the reason why I like OneNote so much for this kind of project organization, is because I like to create a sort of wiki approach where you have the information interlinked with other information that is relevant. So for example here I already created a sketch of a possible world map, right? And what you can do is you can take the image here and you can set it as the background, and then it doesn't move. And what I like to do now is to go and take some image that represents what I envision the world looks like in a certain place. So for example, let's take this, and then basically what I like to do is to place it here. This way I get an overview of the locations which are relevant for the story and what they look like, right? And it's more for myself to have an overview of the whole story and where the characters go. Now, for this story, because the characters are moving around in the world itself, it's a world map, but you could do the same thing for like a city or even just one location. And then another thing that I like to do, which I mentioned, is that I like to link the different information with other subpages. So for example, what you could do here is go, okay, so now we have like the city where the story takes place. I have like a placeholder name just so I remember which city I'm talking about. But for example, then take the text here and right, and then for example, now that I linked the city, I can go to the page where the information about the city itself is. So that's how I like to organize the OneNote itself when it comes especially to the story knowledge, to interlink between the relevant information, but also then when telling the story, for example, when talking about the names, right, that I mentioned before, what I also like to do is to, here on top usually, I go and take the pages which are relevant for the information that I have and go. And then it reminds me that I have information in that section which is also relevant to what I'm talking about here. Okay, so now that I set up my basic OneNote structure, how I want to organize my writing notes, the next thing I will do is to transcribe whatever is still in physical form, and then to also gather up all the notes that I have anywhere, so on my phone, on the desktop, wherever, put it all into one place and to then process through what is stuff that I need to work on, so an actual task, or what is just information and inspiration that I gather in the random starters page.